At a lavish gala, a millionaire makes a shocking promise in front of everyone. He says he will marry whoever can get his son to speak again. But amidst the applause and ambition, only one woman watches him in silence. And it's precisely the one who wasn't seeking the prize who awakens the boy's voice. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's continue. The ballroom of the Grand Astoria Hotel in the heart of New York City was packed with familiar faces. Journalists, entrepreneurs, celebrities, and philanthropists filled every corner of the luxurious space, all gathered for the most anticipated charity event of the year. Crystal chandeliers reflected light onto designer gowns and flawless tuxedos, while waiters circulated with trays of French champagne. It was another one of those events where Manhattan's elite gathered to see and be seen, to display their generosity under the flash of cameras. Gabriel Harrison watched it all from a discreet corner, holding a glass he had barely touched. His dark eyes, once bright and decisive, now carried a deep shadow that no forced smile could hide. Tall, with broad shoulders and a firm posture, he still maintained the appearance of the successful businessman everyone knew. But inside, something had shattered irreparably exactly 1 year and 3 months ago. Isabel's death wasn't just a loss, it was an earthquake that shook the foundations of everything he knew. The woman who lit up his life, who turned their mansion into a home, who made their son Michael laugh every morning, was gone, suddenly and cruelly. An accident no one expected, no one foresaw. And since that day, Gabriel's son hadn't uttered a single word. Michael was only 6 years old when his life changed completely. Before, he was a cheerful, talkative child, full of questions and laughter. He loved to tell made-up stories, imitate funny voices, and sing songs his mother taught him. But after that terrible day, something inside him broke. The words simply vanished. It didn't matter how much Gabriel tried, how much he insisted, how much he begged. Michael just stared in silence, with those brown eyes that seemed to carry an impossible weight for someone so small. For months, Gabriel moved heaven and earth. He hired the best child psychologists in the country, flew in specialists from other states, and paid fortunes for internationally renowned therapists. Nothing worked. Each professional arrived full of promises, with innovative methods, proven techniques, and success stories. But they all left defeated, unable to break through the wall of silence Michael had built around himself. The mansion, once full of life and movement, turned into a silent mausoleum. The staff moved about on tiptoe, avoiding noise. The business meetings Gabriel used to hold at home were moved to his office. Even the decor seemed to have lost its color. Everything was gray, heavy, suffocating. Isabel had been the soul of that house. She was the one who chose fresh flowers every week, who played ambient music during dinners, who turned every room into a warm and lively space. She painted watercolors on weekends, taught Michael to recognize the birds in the garden, and organized impromptu picnics in the living room when it rained. The house breathed through her. Now the paintings she created remained on the walls, but no one stopped to admire them anymore. The grand piano she played every afternoon was covered with a white cloth untouched. The garden she tended with such care was beginning to show signs of a neglect, even with the professional gardeners Gabriel hired. Because a garden needs more than technical maintenance. It needs love, attention, the hand of someone who truly cares. Gabriel tried to preserve everything exactly as Isabel had left it. He didn't move a single piece of furniture, didn't donate any of her clothes, didn't take down a single photo. He believed that somehow, keeping everything the same might bring comfort to Michael. But what he didn't realize was that the house had become a museum of her absence. Every preserved object was a painful reminder of what had been lost. Gabriel tried to work, tried to distract himself, tried to pretend he could move on. But every night, seeing his son sitting alone in his room, staring into space, guilt consumed him. He could close multi-million-dollar deals, resolve corporate crises, and manage hundreds of employees. But he couldn't get his own son to speak again. His desperation grew with each passing day. Gabriel began to question himself as a father, as a man, as a protector. He felt he was failing at the only mission that truly mattered. And it was in this state of emotional exhaustion, in this toxic mix of guilt and helplessness, that he made an extreme decision. The idea came to him during a sleepless night, after watching Michael toss and turn in his sleep yet again. Gabriel thought of everything he hadn't tried. Money was no object. He had unlimited resources. What if he could offer something so huge, so irresistible, that it would attract not just professionals, but anyone with a solution? What if he turned his son's cure into a prize, a public challenge? At first, the idea seemed absurd even to him. But desperation doesn't follow logic. Desperation creates its own rules. And Gabriel was willing to do anything, absolutely anything, to hear his son's voice again. That's how he decided to use the charity event to make the announcement. It would be public, it would be shocking, it would be impossible to ignore. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there had the answer he was so desperately seeking. When it was his turn to go on stage to give the corporate speech, Gabriel took a deep breath. His aides expected the usual words. Thanks to the attendees, praise for the organizers, promises of generous donations. But Gabriel had other plans. The audience applauded politely when he was announced. Gabriel walked to the center of the stage, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the sea of curious faces before him. For a moment, he hesitated. There was still time to back down, to stick to the script, to maintain appearances. But then he thought of Michael alone at home, wrapped in his impenetrable silence. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice firm, the one he used in business meetings. "I know you were expecting a traditional speech, but tonight I need to talk about something much bigger than business or philanthropy." An intrigued silence fell over the ballroom. Gabriel felt hundreds of eyes fixed on him, hanging on his every word. "A year ago, I lost the woman I loved, and on that same day, I also lost my son's voice. Michael was 6 when he stopped speaking. Since then, he hasn't uttered a single word. I've hired the best specialists, tried every possible method, invested fortunes in treatments. Nothing has worked." Murmurs began to spread through the room. Journalists raised their cameras, sensing this was no ordinary speech. Gabriel continued, his voice now thick with emotion. "I've discovered there's something money can't buy, a cure for a pain this deep. But tonight, in front of all of you, I'm making an announcement I never imagined I would make. I promise to marry the woman who can get my son to speak again." The impact was immediate. Gasps of shock echoed through the ballroom. Flashes went off non-stop. Whispered conversations erupted in every corner. Gabriel saw expressions of surprise, of disbelief, of poorly concealed ambition. Some women exchanged quick glances, already calculating the possibilities. Others seemed genuinely shocked by the proposal. "I know it may sound extreme," Gabriel went on, ignoring the uproar. "But I am a desperate man. My fortune means nothing if my son remains trapped in this silence. If anyone at all can give him back his voice, I promise not only my eternal gratitude, but my own life by that person's side. This is my promise, made publicly before all of you." He didn't wait for applause, for reactions, for questions. He simply walked off the stage, leaving the ballroom in complete chaos. As he headed for the exit, Gabriel felt the weight of everyone's eyes on him. He knew he had just turned his own life into a public spectacle. But at that moment, he didn't care. If there was even a slim chance of finding someone who could help Michael, it was worth any price. Outside, Gabriel got into his car and told the driver to take him home. During the entire ride through the illuminated streets of New York, he sat in silence, staring out the window without really seeing anything. He questioned whether he had done the right thing, whether he wasn't just making everything worse. But it was too late to turn back. Meanwhile, backstage at the event in the high society, group chats in the newsrooms of papers and websites, the information was spreading like wildfire. Gabriel Harrison, one of New York's wealthiest businessmen, had promised marriage as a prize. The news was too sensational to be ignored. In the Harrison mansion, located in a gated community in wealthy Westchester County, Marina Miller was finishing up in the kitchen after dinner. She was just another member of the household staff, hired a few months ago to help with domestic chores. Young, with delicate features and a gentle gaze, Marina went unnoticed amidst the luxury that surrounded her. She wore a simple uniform, tied her brown hair in a neat bun, and did her work in silence, almost invisibly. But Marina carried her own secrets. Few knew that, years earlier, she had been a promising music therapy student at NYU. She had talent, dedication, and a bright future ahead of her, until life decided to brutally change her plans. Her family faced a devastating financial crisis, the result of debts that piled up after her father lost his job. To save the house she grew up in, to ensure her younger siblings could stay in school, Marina dropped out of college in her junior year. She remembered the day she made that decision perfectly. She was in the university library studying for a big exam when she got the call from her mother. The trembling voice on the other end of the line told her about the imminent eviction, the mounting bills, the lack of options. Marina looked at the books in front of her, at her classmates focused on their studies, at the future she had so carefully planned, and then she made the only choice she could. She withdrew from her classes the following week. She said goodbye to the professors who believed in her potential, to the friends she had made, to the dreams she had nurtured. She started looking for a job immediately, taking any opportunity that came her way. The money she earned went straight home to pay off debts, to make sure her siblings wouldn't have to drop out of school like she did. It was a decision that broke her heart. Music therapy wasn't just a career for her, it was a calling, a way to use music to heal, to comfort, to transform lives. But reality came knocking hard, and Marina had to choose between her dreams and her family. She chose her family. Since then, she had worked various jobs: retail clerk, receptionist, caregiver, and now a housekeeper at the Harrison residence. She kept her music therapy textbooks in a box at the back of her closet, along with the old guitar her grandmother had given her. Only occasionally, on lonely nights in her small room at the back of the mansion, would she take it out and play softly, missing the times when she believed she could make a difference in the world. Marina didn't yet know about the promise Gabriel had made that night. She didn't watch high society gossip shows, didn't follow the news about millionaire businessmen. Her routine was simple: wake up early, work, look after Michael when needed, and return to her room at the end of the day. But she had noticed something no one else seemed to see. In recent days, whenever she finished her chores and passed by Michael's room, she would find the boy sitting by the window, looking out at the garden with an expression that mixed sadness and loneliness. Her heart ached to see such a small child carrying such a heavy burden. One night, moved by an impulse she couldn't explain, Marina had taken her guitar and played softly in the hallway near Michael's room. She didn't want to bother him, didn't want to force anything. She just felt that maybe music could bring a little comfort to that environment so heavy with silence. To her surprise, when she finished playing and went to put the instrument away, she noticed that Michael's bedroom door was ajar, and the boy was there, standing in the doorway, looking at her with an expression she had never seen before. It wasn't suspicion or fear. It was something close to curiosity, maybe even hope. Marina smiled gently, gave a small wave goodnight, and walked away. She didn't want to scare the boy, didn't want to create expectations, but that night, for the first time in a long time, she felt a pang of that old desire to use music to reach someone. Meanwhile, on social media and TV shows, Gabriel's promise dominated every conversation. Women of all kinds began to plan their strategies. Models, actresses, psychologists, alternative therapists, even charlatans saw a golden opportunity. Some were driven by greed, others by ambition, some even by a strange mix of compassion and self-interest. The news hit the front pages of every newspaper the next morning. Businessman promises marriage to whoever cures his son. Opinions were divided. Some found the gesture desperate and understandable. Others thought it was absurd and even inhumane to turn a child's pain into a public contest. But regardless of the opinions, one thing was certain: the lives of Gabriel, Michael, and everyone around them were about to change irrevocably. And Marina, still sleeping peacefully in her simple room, unaware of it all, would be dragged into the center of this story in a way she could never have imagined. Because sometimes fate chooses the most unexpected paths to bring the right people together at the right time. And music, that old companion she had kept as a silent secret, was about to become the key to transforming not just one life, but three. The next morning arrived with an invasion Gabriel hadn't anticipated. Before the sun was fully up, a crowd of cars was already parked in front of the mansion's gates. Journalists, photographers, curious onlookers, and most of all women of every type were waiting for a chance to get in. The news had spread with terrifying speed, and now all of New York was talking about the desperate businessman's promise. Gabriel woke to the sound of voices from the street. He went to his bedroom window and felt his stomach churn at the scene. What had he done? The promise that had seemed reasonable in the fog of desperation now revealed itself as a catastrophic mistake. But it was too late to turn back. The words had been spoken publicly, recorded by dozens of cameras, shared millions of times on social media. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Aides, lawyers, distant relatives, everyone wanted to know what was happening. Gabriel's personal assistant called 3 times before 7 a.m., reporting that hundreds of women had already sent emails, letters, and messages requesting an opportunity to meet Michael. Inside the house, Marina woke with a start to the unusual noise. Puzzled by the commotion, she dressed quickly and went to the kitchen, where she found the other staff members gossiping about what had happened the night before. It was there, through fragmented conversations and shocked glances, that she finally learned of the promise Gabriel had made. At first, Marina couldn't believe it. Marriage as a prize, turning a child's pain into a public competition. It seemed unreal, almost obscene, but seeing the crowd outside, she understood it was all true. And she felt a mix of pity and outrage. Pity for Michael, who would now be treated like a trophy to be won, and outrage at Gabriel for exposing his son in this way. During breakfast, Gabriel gathered the entire household staff. He was visibly shaken, with dark circles under his eyes and the expression of someone who hadn't slept. He explained that from that moment on, the house's routine would change drastically. There would be constant visits, interviews, attempts to get close to Michael, and he asked, almost begged, for everyone to help maintain some semblance of order amidst the chaos he himself had created. Marina listened in silence, maintaining the neutral expression she had learned to wear in previous jobs. But inside, she felt a mix of conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to scream, to question how a father could do that to his own son. Another part recognized the desperation etched on Gabriel's face, the exhaustion of someone who had tried everything and failed. The first candidates arrived shortly after lunch. Gabriel, still trying to maintain some control over the situation, decided to set rules. There would be a screening process. Only people with some relevant training or experience would be allowed to try and approach Michael. He wouldn't allow charlatans or obvious opportunists to turn his home into a circus. But the line between the serious and the opportunistic was far too thin. There were psychologists with impressive resumes, specialized speech therapists, holistic healers with alternative methods, renowned educators. And there were also models, actresses, and social media influencers who claimed to have a special gift with children. All dressed impeccably, all with rehearsed smiles, all with eyes shining with poorly disguised ambition. The first was a psychologist named Dr. Amanda Collins, a graduate of Ivy League universities with years of experience in cases of selective mutism. She entered the house with an air of professional confidence, carrying a briefcase full of scientific articles and case studies. Gabriel received her in the living room, watching her every move, every word, searching for any sign that she could be the answer. Dr. Collins explained her therapeutic approach with technical terms and proven methodologies. Gabriel listened intently, wanting to believe, needing to believe. When she finally met Michael, who was sitting on the library sofa flipping through a picture book, she approached with calculated gestures and a carefully modulated voice. "Hello, Michael. My name is Amanda, and I'm here to be your friend," she said, crouching in front of the boy with a smile that looked like it had been trained in customer service courses. Michael glanced at her for a brief second and then returned his eyes to the book, completely indifferent. The psychologist was undeterred. She began using gradual approach techniques, asking open-ended questions, offering therapeutic toys, trying to create a safe environment. But Michael remained distant, almost absent, as if she simply didn't exist. After 40 minutes of frustrated attempts, Dr. Collins had to admit she had made no progress. She left the library with a look of forced determination, promising to return the next day with new strategies. Gabriel thanked her politely, but he could already feel the familiar weight of disappointment. Others followed. A famous actress who claimed to have cured her nephew of a similar problem using drama techniques. A therapist who worked with horses and believed equine therapy would be the solution. A motivational coach who promised results in less than a week. Each one arrived full of conviction, each one believed they had the perfect method, and each one left without getting a single word out of Michael. The boy, who already lived in his silent world, was now being bombarded by strangers. Women who tried to hug him without permission, who spoke too loudly, who invaded his personal space with a forced intimacy. He began to react in the only way he could, by hiding. Marina watched it all with a heavy heart. During her daily chores, she saw Michael becoming more and more frightened, more withdrawn. He would hide under the bed when he heard unfamiliar voices approaching. He would run into the bedroom closet when someone tried to get close. On one particularly terrible day, she found him huddled inside a laundry room cabinet, trembling, his eyes wide with fear. In that moment, Marina couldn't hold back. She gently dismissed the candidate of the moment, a model who was insisting on using creative visualization techniques, and knelt in front of the cabinet. She said nothing, made no sudden moves. She just sat there on the cold laundry room floor and waited. Minutes later, Michael slowly emerged from his hiding spot and sat beside her, still shaking. Marina put her arm around the boy's small shoulders, offering only her presence, only understanding, silence. And Michael, for the first time since this nightmare began, relaxed a little. He rested his head on Marina's shoulder and closed his eyes, exhausted. It was at that moment that Gabriel, who was pacing the house trying to manage the chaos, passed by the laundry room and saw the scene. He stopped in the doorway, watching in silence. There was something about that image that touched him, deeply. It wasn't a method, it wasn't a technique, it wasn't a strategy. It was just pure humanity. One person offering comfort to another, with no ulterior motives, no expectations. In the following days, the Harrison mansion turned into a veritable battlefield. Women arrived, increasingly desperate to get their chance. Some brought expensive gifts, others promised donations to charities in exchange for an opportunity. There was even one who offered advantageous business contracts for Gabriel's company. The variety of profiles was staggering. There was a former beauty queen who claimed to have a special gift for communicating with children. A Mickey, gospel singer who promised to use the power of faith and music. A neurologist who wanted to try an innovative technique, still in its trial phase. A ballerina who believed in dance as an alternative form of expression. Each had her theory, her method, her conviction. Some arrived with entire teams, assistants, camera crews, even lawyers, ready to document any progress that could be credited to them. Others came alone, but carrying suitcases full of equipment, books, therapeutic toys, musical instruments, art supplies. The mansion looked like a warehouse of other people's hopes. Gabriel tried to maintain some criteria, some order. He set specific times for each candidate, limited the duration of each attempt, and forbade methods that seemed too invasive. But it was like trying to hold back an avalanche with his bare hands. For every rule he imposed, 10 women found ways to bend it. With every attempt to protect Michael, he realized he was only delaying the inevitable. The situation became even more chaotic when people with no training or experience began to show up, driven solely by greed and the delusion that they possessed some hidden talent. One of them, a cosmetics saleswoman who believed in energy crystals, managed to get in by posing as a certified holistic therapist. She tried to place colored stones around Michael while chanting poorly pronounced Sanskrit mantras. The boy was so frightened that he locked himself in the bathroom and refused to come out for hours. The press camped out in front of the mansion. TV shows ran daily reports on the progress or lack thereof. Social media exploded with heated debates about the ethics of Gabriel's promise. Renowned psychologists gave interviews criticizing the public exposure of the child. Others defended Gabriel as a desperate father who deserved compassion. The headlines multiplied daily. "Tycoon turns son into a prize," one tabloid screamed. "A father's desperate love," another defended. Society columnists speculated on which women had the best chances, creating rankings and betting pools. Social media influencers made videos giving tips on how to approach traumatized children, all hoping for their chance to get inside the mansion. Gabriel's PR team's phone rang off the hook. Offers from TV shows to document the process, proposals for books about the journey. Even a Hollywood production company interested in buying the rights to the story. It was all grotesque, but Gabriel had opened the door to this circus. Now he didn't know how to close it. Within the company he ran, business was also suffering. Partners questioned whether he was in an emotional state to make important decisions. Meetings were interrupted by calls from the press. Some clients began to distance themselves, uncomfortable with the public exposure. Others, curiously, drew closer, wanting to be associated with the story that had captivated the country. Amidst it all, Michael sank deeper and deeper into his mutism. If before he would at least look at people, now he avoided even eye contact. He spent his days locked in his room, refusing to come out. He stopped eating properly, lost weight, and developed dark circles that gave his small face a sickly appearance. Gabriel watched his son wither away and felt the guilt grow like a tumor. Every night, he reviewed the security camera footage, trying to understand what was going wrong, because it was no longer just a frustrated attempt to find a cure. It was a systematic torture that he, unintentionally, had inflicted upon his own son. He would sit alone in his office with a glass of scotch he rarely drank and watch the cold. Camera images of Michael hiding, trembling, running away. He saw the terror in the boy's eyes every time a door opened, the way his body instinctively recoiled at the sound of unfamiliar voices, and he wondered what kind of father he had become. There were moments when Gabriel thought about giving up, about publicly announcing that he had made a terrible mistake and ending it all immediately. But he had invested so much in that promise, exposed so much of his vulnerability, that backing down seemed like an even greater defeat. He was caught in a trap of his own, making unable to move forward or backward without causing more damage. Marina continued with her duties, but now she dedicated part of her time to simply being near Michael. Not like the other women, who invaded with techniques and promises. She would just be there in the same room, folding laundry or arranging books, offering a quiet presence. And slowly, Michael began to tolerate her proximity in a way he no longer tolerated anyone else's. One afternoon, when a particularly insistent therapist tried to force Michael to participate in an art therapy session, the boy had something close to a panic attack. He began to cry silently, tears streaming down his face, his body shaking with mute sobs. The therapist, not knowing how to handle it, ran out of the room in a panic, calling for Gabriel. It was Marina who arrived first. She entered the room, closed the door behind her, cutting off the noise from the hallway, and approached slowly. Michael was huddled in the corner, between the bed and the wall, in a fetal position. Marina didn't try to touch him, didn't ask questions, didn't offer empty words of comfort. She simply sat on the floor, a few feet away, and began to hum softly. It was a simple melody, almost a lullaby. No words, just soft sounds that filled the silence without assaulting it. Marina closed her eyes and let the music carry her, forgetting for a moment where she was, forgetting the rules and limitations of her position. Slowly, very slowly, Michael's sobs began to subside. His breathing calmed. The hands clutching his knees loosened a bit, and then, to Marina's surprise, he began to slowly crawl toward her. Marina opened her eyes when she felt the small weight of the boy settling beside her. Michael was there, almost leaning against her, still trembling slightly but calmer. She continued humming, now gently running her fingers through the boy's hair in an instinctive, motherly gesture of affection. In the hallway, Gabriel watched it all through the slightly ajar door. What he witnessed in that moment was a silent revelation. For the first time in months, he saw his son relaxed, almost at peace, and the person responsible wasn't one of the expensive specialists he had hired, not one of the ambitious women vying for his hand in marriage. It was the young housekeeper he had barely noticed until now. That night, Gabriel made a decision. He had to end this madness before it caused irreparable damage to Michael, but at the same time, he couldn't ignore what he had witnessed. There was something special in the way Marina connected with the boy. something that went beyond techniques or methods. It was pure instinct, pure empathy, pure humanity. And for the first time since making that desperate promise, Gabriel began to see a glimmer of hope. It didn't come from where he expected. It didn't have the shape he imagined. But it was there, real and palpable. In the corner of a room, between an invisible housekeeper and a boy who had lost his voice. 2 weeks had passed since the Harrison mansion had become a stage for desperate attempts and successive failures. Gabriel finally summoned the courage to do what he should have done from the start. He called a press conference and announced he was temporarily suspending all visits. He needed to reorganize the process, protect his son, and think more clearly. The news frustrated many candidates still waiting for their chance, but it also brought a sigh of relief to those who had been following the situation with concern. The mansion returned to silence, but it was a different kind of silence. It was no longer just the absence of sound. It was a quiet, filled with tension, expectation, and fear. Michael remained locked in his room, only coming out to eat quickly before rushing back to his hiding place. He no longer played, no longer looked out the window, no longer showed interest in anything. Gabriel tried to get close several times, but each attempt only pushed the boy further away. It was as if Michael had lost trust not only in the world, but especially in his own father. And Gabriel, who had always been a man of action and quick decisions, felt completely powerless in the face of that silent rejection. Marina watched it all with a deep sadness. She continued her duties, maintaining the discretion her position required, but her heart ached every time she saw Michael. The boy had become a shadow, a ghost wandering the halls of his own home, and she, who had studied music therapy precisely to help children in traumatic situations, felt frustrated that she couldn't do more. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, Marina couldn't sleep. The image of Michael huddled in the corner of his room, trembling with fear, wouldn't leave her mind. She got up, went to the small closet in her room, and took out the old guitar her grandmother had given her. It had been weeks since she'd played. Since starting work at the mansion, she had put the instrument away, just as she had put away her dreams, locked up, hidden, almost forgotten. But that night, she felt an urgent need to play. Not for anyone, not with any purpose, just for herself to remember who she was before she got lost in unfulfilling jobs and routines that didn't define her. She sat on the edge of her bed and began to gently strum the strings, almost in a musical whisper. The melody that flowed from her fingers was an old one, a song her grandmother used to play on Sunday afternoons. It had no lyrics, just a sequence of notes that flowed naturally, carrying memories of a happier time. Marina closed her eyes and let herself be carried away, forgetting for a few minutes where she was, who she was now, what she had lost. She didn't notice when her bedroom door, which she had left ajar because of the heat, opened a little wider. She didn't see the small pajama-clad figure that stopped in the hallway, drawn by the sound. Michael was there, standing in the darkness, listening. The boy had left his room because he couldn't sleep. Nightmares haunted him every night, and this one was no different. He was walking down the hall when he heard the music coming from Marina's room. It was a sound unlike anything he had heard in recent weeks. It wasn't invasive, it demanded nothing, it didn't try to pull him from his silence. It was just there. He approached slowly with the caution of someone afraid of startling a bird. The door was ajar, and he could see Marina's back, focused on her guitar, completely oblivious to the world around her. There was something profoundly peaceful about the scene. For the first time in a long time, Michael felt his breathing slow, his shoulders relax, the weight on his chest lighten slightly. He stood there for long minutes, just watching and listening. The music Marina played was different from anything he knew. It wasn't the cheerful, upbeat songs his mother used to play on the piano. It wasn't the children's songs that played on his electronic toys. It was something deeper, more melancholic, but at the same time, comforting. As if the melody itself understood the pain without trying to deny or fix it. Michael vaguely remembered the music therapy classes he had attended when he was younger, taken by his mother, who had always believed in the healing power of music. He remembered a kind therapist who used instruments to help children express emotions they couldn't verbalize. But that was before, in a time that now seemed to belong to another life, to another Michael who no longer existed. Marina played for about 15 minutes, lost in her own memories and emotions. When she finally opened her eyes and prepared to put the instrument away, she turned and was startled. Michael was there, sitting on the hallway floor, leaning against the wall, looking at her with an expression that mixed curiosity and something that might have been peace. "Michael," she whispered, surprised. Her first impulse was to apologize, afraid she had woken the boy, worried about the consequences of playing so late. But something in his expression made her hesitate. There was no fear there, no discomfort, just a quiet attention. Marina smiled gently and made an inviting gesture. "Want to come in?" she asked softly, not expecting an answer, because she knew it wouldn't come. To her surprise, Michael stood up and entered the room, sitting on the floor near the bed, maintaining a respectful but present distance. She didn't know what to do. There was no instruction manual for this moment. All the rules she had learned in college seemed distant and inadequate, so she decided to simply trust her instincts. She picked up the guitar again and started playing, even more softly, as if playing just for the two of them, just for that moment suspended in time. Michael closed his eyes and let the melody wash over him. They weren't famous songs. They weren't children's songs. They were simple compositions that Marina improvised, letting her fingers guide the way. And for the first time since his mother was gone, the boy felt something close to safety. That night established a silent ritual. Marina didn't plan it, didn't announce it, didn't ask for permission, it just happened. On the following nights, always. At the same time, she would take out her guitar and play softly, and Michael would appear, sit in the same spot, and listen. Gabriel, who still spent his nights reviewing security footage out of a mix of habit and guilt, eventually discovered what was happening. One night, checking the hallway recording, he saw Michael leave his room and enter Marina's. His first instinct was alarm, but then he activated the audio and heard the gentle music, saw his son relaxed, at peace. He continued to watch night after night without intervening. He observed how Michael gradually got closer to Marina, how he went from sitting on the floor to sitting on the edge of the bed, how he sometimes rested his head on her shoulder as he listened. It was subtle progress, almost imperceptible but undeniable. For the first time since making that desperate promise, Gabriel saw real hope. It didn't come from proven techniques or scientific methods. It came from something much simpler and more profound, a genuine human connection, built on music and shared silence. He decided not to interfere. He didn't want to spoil what was developing organically between Marina and Michael. But he began to see Marina in a new light. Who was this young housekeeper he had barely noticed? How could she reach his son when all the experts had failed? He started asking discreet questions to the other staff members. He found out that Marina was well liked by everyone, always kind, always willing to help, but also reserved and a bit of a loner. No one knew much about her past, her family, her dreams. She was simply Marina, the efficient and quiet employee. Gabriel decided to investigate further. He asked the HR department to send him Marina's employment file. That's how he discovered she had dropped out of college in her junior year of the music therapy program. The reason given at the time of hiring had been vague, just family issues. But now, that piece of information took on a whole new meaning: music therapy. She had studied the exact field that could help Michael, and she had given it all up, for reasons he didn't know. Gabriel felt a mix of curiosity and respect. There was more to this young woman than met the eye, much more. He researched music therapy that same night, reading scientific articles, case studies, patient testimonials. He discovered it was a recognized technique for treating trauma, especially in children. That music could access parts of the brain that words couldn't reach, create bridges of communication where verbal language had failed. And he wondered why he hadn't thought of it before, how he had hired so many specialists and none of them had suggested music therapy. The answer, he realized with bitterness, was that he himself had dismissed any approach that didn't seem scientific enough, proven enough, expensive enough. He had trusted in diplomas hanging on walls and established reputations, ignoring that sometimes healing comes from unexpected places, from humble people who carry real knowledge and genuine love. One afternoon, he decided to talk to her. He called Marina to his office after she finished her chores. The young woman entered, visibly nervous, probably thinking she was about to be fired or reprimanded for something. Gabriel noticed her tension and tried to put her at ease. "Marina, please, have a seat," he said, pointing to a chair in front of his desk. "Don't worry. You haven't done anything wrong. Quite the opposite." She sat on the edge of the chair, her hands clasped in her lap, waiting. Gabriel observed her for a moment, noticing for the first time the details he had previously ignored. The kind eyes, the modest posture, the expression of someone always ready to serve but never to ask. "I found out you play the guitar," he began, deciding to get straight to the point, "and that Michael has been spending his nights listening to you play." Marina turned pale. "Mr. Harrison, I am so sorry. It wasn't my intention to disturb anyone or overstep my bounds. Michael just showed up and I—" Gabriel held up a hand, interrupting her. "You don't need to apologize, Marina. In fact, I want to thank you. It's been the only thing that has helped my son these past few weeks." She blinked, surprised. She hadn't expected gratitude. "I also found out you studied music therapy," Gabriel continued, watching her reaction. He saw her surprise turn into something close to pain. "Can you tell me why you left the program?" Marina looked down. For a long moment she was silent, and Gabriel thought she wouldn't answer. But then, in a low voice thick with restrained emotion, she began to speak. She told him about her family's financial crisis, about her father losing his job, about the debts that piled up. She spoke of the difficult decision to leave college to work, about how she had to choose between her dreams and her family's survival. She described the following years working in unfulfilling jobs, keeping her guitar as if she were keeping a piece of herself. She also talked about how, in the first few months after dropping out, she still tried to stay current by reading articles and studies on her own. How she would watch videos of music therapy conferences late at night, after long work shifts. How she daydreamed about the day she could go back, finish her degree, and truly work in the field she loved. But as time went on, the financial responsibilities only grew. Her mother got sick and needed expensive medication. Her younger brother won a scholarship to a good private school, but there were expenses the scholarship didn't cover. Marina kept postponing her dreams, 1 month at a time, until she stopped setting tentative return dates. She simply accepted that that chapter of her life was closed. "But you know what the hardest part is?" she continued, her voice cracking. "It's not being unable to practice the profession. It's knowing I could be making a difference in people's lives, in children's lives, and instead I'm just cleaning houses and serving meals. Not that there's anything wrong with that," she quickly added, "but it's hard to know you had a higher purpose and had to give it up." Gabriel listened in silence, and with every word, a deep respect for this young woman grew within him. She had sacrificed so much, and yet she maintained her kindness, her humility, her capacity to care for others. She was the opposite of all. Those women who had invaded his house in recent weeks, driven by ambition and self-interest. "Marina," he said when she finished, "have you ever thought about finishing your degree?" She gave a sad smile. "Every day, Mr. Harrison. But it's not possible. I have to work to help my family, and even if I had the time, I can't afford the tuition." Gabriel was silent for a moment, thinking. An idea was beginning to form in his mind, but he needed time to let it mature. He thanked Marina for the conversation and dismissed her, but asked her to continue, playing for Michael, now with his official approval. That night, Gabriel didn't review the security cameras. Instead, he went to Michael's room and stood outside in the hallway, just listening. Marina's music flowed softly through the air, and for the first time in a long time, Gabriel allowed himself to close his eyes and just feel. Feel the music, feel the hope, feel that maybe, just maybe, things could start to heal. He stood there for almost an hour, leaning against the hallway wall, letting the melody envelop him. He thought of Isabel, of how she had always believed in the transformative power of music. He remembered afternoons when she would play the piano while Michael drew, how the house breathed art and beauty in those moments, and he wondered why he had allowed all of that to die with her. Marina's music was different from Isabel's piano, but it carried the same essence: love transformed into sound, care expressed in melody. And Gabriel realized that perhaps Michael's healing wouldn't come from forgetting his mother, but from finding new ways to connect with the beauty she had so loved. And it was in that moment of quiet and music that Gabriel understood something fundamental. The answer he was looking for wasn't in scientific methods or public promises. It was in something much simpler and more powerful: the ability of one person to genuinely connect with another, without expectations, without demands, just with presence and care. And that person had been there all along, invisible in her humility, but carrying exactly what his son needed. 3 weeks had passed since Gabriel discovered the nightly music sessions between Marina and Michael. In that time, something extraordinary began to happen. The boy, who once fled from any human contact, started actively seeking out Marina's presence during the day. He would follow her discreetly around the house as she worked, sit quietly near her as she folded laundry, and watch as she prepared meals in the kitchen. Marina, in turn, adapted naturally to this new dynamic. She didn't make a fuss, didn't draw attention to the progress, didn't treat Michael like a therapeutic project. She simply included him in her routine organically. Sometimes she would hum while she worked, other times she would play music on her phone at a low volume, creating an atmosphere of musical normalcy that enveloped the boy without suffocating him. Gabriel watched it all with a mixture of admiration and growing humility. He began to understand that he had been so focused on finding a miraculous cure that he had ignored the obvious. Michael didn't need revolutionary methods or famous professionals. He needed someone who treated him like a child, not a problem to be solved. And Marina did exactly that. One morning, Gabriel woke up to a sound he hadn't heard in over a year. It was coming from downstairs, from the kitchen. It was a low humming, almost imperceptible. He ran down the stairs, his heart racing, hardly able to believe it. When he reached the kitchen, the scene he found made him stop in the doorway, unable to move. Michael was sitting on the counter, swinging his legs, while Marina prepared breakfast, and the boy was humming. It wasn't words, it wasn't a complete song. It was just a continuous sound, accompanying the melody Marina was singing softly. But it was sound. It was a voice. It was life returning to those vocal cords that had remained silent for so long. The sound was fragile, almost a musical whisper, but to Gabriel it was like a full symphony. It represented months of pain slowly dissolving, a wall of silence beginning to crumble brick by brick. Gabriel had to lean against the doorframe, his legs weak under the emotional weight of that moment. Marina noticed Gabriel's presence and made a discreet gesture for him not to approach, not to interrupt. She knew well the risks of drawing too much attention to Michael's progress. Any pressure, any explicit expectation could make him retreat back into silence. They had to let it flow naturally, like water finding its way through stones. Gabriel nodded, standing there, silent tears streaming down his face. He watched for long minutes, witnessing this small miracle happening in the simplicity of an ordinary morning. He saw his son swinging his legs carefree, something he hadn't done in so long. He saw the lightness in his shoulders, the way he looked at Marina with trust and affection. When Michael finally noticed his father and stopped humming, Gabriel smiled carefully and just waved, pretending everything was absolutely normal, that he hadn't just witnessed the most important moment of the past few months. He poured a cup of coffee, kissed the top of Michael's head as if he did it every day, and left the kitchen with measured steps, maintaining the appearance of normalcy until he reached the hallway. Then he walked away, went back to his room, and cried like he hadn't cried since the day he lost Isabel. But this time, they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of hope. That afternoon, Gabriel made a decision that had been maturing for days. He called Marina to his office again, but this time with a carefully crafted proposal. "Marina," he began, motioning for her to sit. "I want to make you an offer. Actually, I want to right a wrong that was done when you had to leave your studies." She looked at him, confused. not understanding where he was going with this. "I want to pay for you to finish your music therapy degree," Gabriel said directly. "I'll cover all the expenses, tuition, materials, transportation. And more than that, I want to officially hire you as Michael's music therapist, with a fair salary for the specialized work you've already been doing intuitively." Marina was silent, processing his words. Her mind struggled between impossible hope and the fear that she was dreaming. "But I need to be clear," Gabriel continued, sensing her hesitation, "that this has nothing to do with that absurd promise I made. It's not a condition for anything. It's simply a recognition that you have a gift, a calling, and that you deserve the opportunity to develop it. Michael will benefit, of course, but you also deserve this for yourself." "Mr. Harrison," Marina finally found her voice, though it was trembling. "I don't know what to say. It's fair," Gabriel interrupted gently. "It's the least I can do for someone who is giving me my son back. Think about it. Talk. To your family if you need to, but know that the offer is genuine and has no strings attached." Marina left the office in a state of shock. Her legs trembled as she walked through the mansion's corridors. She went back to her room, closed the door, and finally allowed the tears to fall. Tears of relief, of gratitude, of renewed hope. Maybe her dreams weren't dead after all. Maybe there was still time to become who she had always wanted to be. In the following days, Marina accepted the offer. She contacted the university, re-enrolled, and planned her schedule to balance work and studies. Her family was ecstatic with the news. Her mother cried with joy. Her father finally managed a smile after years of guilt for not being able to keep his job, and her younger siblings celebrated, knowing their sister was happy. Her first day back at class was emotional for Marina. She entered the classroom with a mix of nervousness and anticipation. Some professors still remembered her and welcomed her enthusiastically. Younger classmates looked at her with curiosity, wondering who this older student was, returning after so long. But Marina didn't care. She was exactly where she needed to be. Every evening after her classes, she would return to the mansion and share what she had learned with Michael. She tested new techniques with him, tried different musical approaches, always careful not to turn their sessions into something clinical or mechanical. She maintained the lightness, the spontaneity, the affection that had characterized their encounters from the beginning. Gabriel funded not only her studies, but also the purchase of appropriate musical instruments for therapy. The mansion, once a silent museum of absence, began to fill with sounds. A digital piano was installed in the long-closed music room. Small, colorful percussion instruments appeared around the house. A recorder, a child-sized guitar, even a small electronic keyboard that Michael could take to his room. But the most important thing was Michael's progress. With Marina's constant presence and their daily music therapy sessions, now structured and intentional, the boy began to take bigger steps. He not only hummed more, but started to imitate sounds, to clap along to rhythms, to use small percussion instruments that Marina brought from the university. Gabriel watched it all, amazed. He participated in some sessions when Marina allowed, learning about music therapy himself, about patience, about the art of healing without forcing. He began to understand that all this time he had been fighting against Michael's silence, when he should have been simply accompanying the boy in his pain. One evening, after a particularly productive session where Michael had managed to play a simple xylophone following a rhythmic pattern, Gabriel and Marina met in the kitchen making tea. It was late, the house was quiet, and for the first time since it all began, they talked not as employer and employee, but as two people sharing a common mission. The kitchen was lit only by the soft light above the stove, creating an intimate and cozy atmosphere. Gabriel was making chamomile tea, a habit he had recently picked up on nights when insomnia visited. Marina was leaning against the counter, still processing that evening's session, mentally noting Michael's progress to record later in her therapy journal. "Did you know that today was the first time Michael played an instrument since Isabel passed away?" Gabriel commented, stirring his spoon absently in his cup. She tried to teach him piano, but he preferred to just listen and dance. Today he played, Marina, of his own free will. "Music has that power," Marina replied softly. "It builds bridges where words can't reach. Michael is reconnecting with parts of himself that were frozen by grief. It's a beautiful process to witness." Gabriel looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. He saw not just the talented music therapist, not just the kind person who cared for his son. He saw a strong woman who had sacrificed so much, who carried her own traumas and interrupted dreams, but who still found the strength to care for others with genuine love. "Marina," he said after a long silence, "you know that promise I made was a mistake born of desperation, but a mistake nonetheless. I plan to publicly announce that I'm withdrawing the offer." "I think that's a good decision," she replied. "Michael isn't a prize, and marriage isn't something you should use as a bargaining chip." "But," Gabriel hesitated, choosing his words carefully, "I want you to know that my gratitude for you goes far beyond any absurd promise. You're not just helping Michael. You're teaching me how to be a better father, a better man." Marina smiled, touched by the sincerity in his words. "I'm just doing what I love, Mr. Harrison. Helping through music has always been my dream. Having the chance to do that with Michael is a gift for me, too." They stood there talking for hours, sharing stories about Isabel, about Marina's family, about hopes and fears. And Gabriel realized that for the first time since losing his wife, he felt something beyond pain and guilt. He felt connection. He felt life pulsing again. Gabriel told her how he met Isabel at a charity auction, how she challenged him intellectually from their first meeting, how she transformed his life, as a workaholic businessman, into something with real meaning. Marina shared memories of the grandmother who gave her the guitar, a wise woman who always believed that music could heal any wound of the soul. They talked about Michael, about small milestones they had observed, about how each bit of progress, no matter how small, represented a monumental victory. Gabriel admitted his fears that he would never hear his son's voice again, while Marina confessed that she sometimes doubted her own abilities, feeling like an imposter for not having a completed degree. "You're not an imposter," Gabriel said firmly. "You have something no degree can teach, genuine empathy and love for what you do. I saw dozens of highly qualified professionals fail where you are succeeding. You know why? Because they saw Michael as a case, a professional challenge. You see him as Michael, just Michael." But he knew he had to be careful. Marina was young, vulnerable in her position as an employee, and he couldn't and wouldn't put her in an uncomfortable situation. Whatever he was feeling needed to be kept, processed, and understood before any action was taken. She deserved respect, not pressure. And Michael needed her. As a therapist, not as a potential stepmother brought in by forced circumstances. The next morning, Gabriel called a press conference. In front of the cameras and journalists who had followed him since the beginning of this saga, he made a formal announcement. "A few weeks ago, I made a desperate and wrong decision. I promised marriage as a reward for my son's cure. Today, I publicly acknowledge that was a grave mistake. My son is not a trophy, and marriage is not something to be offered as a prize. Therefore, I am completely retracting that promise." The room buzzed immediately, but Gabriel continued, raising his voice. "Michael is making progress not because of public promises or competitions, but thanks to the dedicated and loving work of a music therapy professional. I've learned that healing cannot be bought, forced, or won through public spectacles. Healing happens in silence, in patience, in unconditional love. And for that, I apologize to everyone who held out hope based on my misguided promise. I especially apologize to my son for having exposed him in this way." He ended the press conference without taking questions, leaving the journalists in a frenzy. The headlines in the following days were varied. Some praised his courage in admitting his mistake. Others criticized him for raising hopes and then dashing them. But Gabriel no longer cared about public opinion. He only cared about Michael, his progress, and rebuilding a life that made sense. That night, while reviewing the security cameras out of habit, Gabriel witnessed something that made his heart nearly stop. In their nightly music sessions, Michael was no longer just listening. He began to murmur something that sounded like attempts at words. They weren't clear, they didn't form sentences, but they were undoubtedly attempts at verbal communication. Gabriel immediately activated the sound system and turned up the volume. And then he heard it. Fragments of sounds, disconnected syllables, timid attempts to form words. It was like watching a flower bloom in slow motion, petal by petal, revealing the beauty that had always been there, just dormant. Tears streamed down his face again, but this time he didn't wipe them away. He let them fall freely as he watched his son fight to reclaim his voice, guided by the gentle music and loving presence of Marina. And he knew with a certainty that went beyond reason that this was the true cure. Not instant, not miraculous, but real and deep and lasting. The road ahead would still be long, Gabriel knew. Months of therapy ahead, progress and setbacks, moments of frustration and victory. But for the first time since it all began, he genuinely believed they would get there. Together, step by step, note by note, until Michael's voice could finally rise, complete and strong again. 6 months had passed since that morning Gabriel first heard Michael hum. Half a year of steady progress, of small daily victories, of slow and careful rebuilding. The Harrison mansion had been completely transformed. It was no longer a mausoleum of silence and pain, but a living space filled with music, laughter, and hope. Michael was now back in school, closely supported by Marina in after-school sessions. Although he still spoke less than other children his age, he could communicate when necessary, express his needs and interact with his peers. His teachers reported admirable progress, praised his resilience, and celebrated every complete sentence as the achievement it truly was. Marina had graduated from her music therapy program with honors, defending a thesis on the treatment of selective mutism in children through music, using Michael's case as her central study. The review board was impressed not only with the academic rigor of her work, but with the evident passion and dedication that permeated every page. She wasn't just writing about a clinical case, she was documenting a journey of healing that had transformed not only Michael, but herself and Gabriel as well. Gabriel, for his part, had fulfilled his promise to create a foundation dedicated to child music therapy. The Isabel Harrison Foundation offered free treatment to children from low-income families facing various types of trauma. Marina was naturally chosen as the clinical director, responsible for training new music therapists and supervising the most delicate cases. The project grew beyond initial expectations. What began as a small clinic in a middle-class neighborhood of New York quickly expanded. Other branches opened in different parts of the city. Partnerships were established with public schools and hospitals. Michael's story, shared with proper authorization and ethical care, inspired other families to seek help. But the most profound transformation had occurred in their personal relationships. Gabriel and Marina, who had started as employer and employee, developed a genuine friendship based on mutual respect and admiration. They talked daily, about Michael but also about politics, literature, music and dreams. They discovered they had more in common than the circumstances that had brought them together. Gabriel admired Marina's strength, her ability to sacrifice so much for others without losing her kindness. Marina respected Gabriel's humility in admitting his mistakes, his willingness to learn, his transformation from a desperate father into a present and loving one. And they both felt something more, something they didn't dare name for fear of complicating what was already so delicate. Michael, with the sharp intuition of children, sensed the connection between them. He often asked for Marina to stay for dinner, to watch movies with them in the living room, to join in his games. It had become common to see her integrated into the family routine in ways that went beyond the role of a therapist. One Saturday afternoon, almost 7 months after the journey began, the moment everyone had been waiting for but no one had forced, finally happened. Michael, Marina and Gabriel were in the mansion's garden, which had been revitalized and was now blooming in vibrant colors. Marina was playing the guitar, sitting on a stone bench while Michael played with a toy car nearby. Gabriel watched them, lost in thought. He reflected on everything that had changed, on how this simple domestic scene was the complete opposite of the desperation he had felt the year before. And it was in this moment of quiet contemplation that Michael did something extraordinary. The boy stopped playing, walked over to Marina, gently touched her arm to get her attention, and said, in a clear, firm voice, 3 words no one expected to hear at that moment. "Marina, I love you." Time seemed to stand still. Marina carefully set down her guitar, her eyes instantly filling with tears. Gabriel felt his heart clench, an overwhelming mix of joy for his son's progress and acknowledgement of a truth he himself had been denying. "I love you too, Michael," Marina replied, hugging the boy with infinite tenderness. Gabriel approached, knelt beside them, and for the first time in months allowed himself to cry openly in front of his son. They weren't tears of pain, but of deep gratitude and overflowing love. Michael turned and hugged his father too, creating a moment of unity that sealed a healing that went far beyond the ability to speak. That night, after Michael was asleep, Gabriel asked Marina to talk in the garden. The full moon illuminated the newly planted flowers, and the air was fragrant with the scent of jasmine. There was a tension in the air, but it was a tension of anticipation, not fear. "Marina," Gabriel began, choosing his words carefully, "I need to be honest with you about something I've been feeling for months." She looked at him with those kind eyes that had become so familiar, so essential. "When I made that absurd promise, I was trying to buy a solution to my pain. I was willing to trade my life for anyone who could give Michael his voice back. But you showed up, not looking for rewards or recognition. You simply offered love and music without asking for anything in return." Marina remained silent, her heart racing, sensing where this conversation was headed. "And in the process of healing Michael, you ended up healing me too. You taught me about patience, about humility, about what really matters. You made me feel something again besides pain and guilt. And now I look at you and I see not just my son's therapist, not just a dear friend, but an extraordinary woman I have completely fallen in love with." Tears were now streaming freely down Marina's face. She had felt the same, but had never dared to express it, respecting the hierarchies, the established roles, the fragility of the situation. "But I need you to know," Gabriel continued quickly, "that there is absolutely no pressure here. You don't owe me anything. The foundation is yours, your work is recognized, your independence is guaranteed. If you don't feel the same, if you'd prefer to keep our relationship as it is, I will completely respect that. I just needed to be honest about my feelings." Marina took a deep breath, wiped her tears with the back of her hand, and smiled through her emotion. "Gabriel, in these months working with Michael, I've learned that silence can say a lot. But sometimes we need to find the courage to use our voice, and my voice wants to say that I've fallen in love with you too, for your dedication as a father, for your humility in admitting your mistakes, for the person you've become. But I was afraid of ruining what we've built, afraid of not being enough for you and Michael." "Don't be," Gabriel interrupted gently, moving closer. "You are more than enough. You are exactly what we needed, what I need." They stood there, under the moonlight, allowing the repressed feelings to finally surface. And when Gabriel tenderly touched Marina's face and kissed her softly, it was as if the last piece of a complex puzzle had finally found its place. In the following months, Gabriel and Marina built their relationship with the same care they had dedicated to Michael's healing. There was no rush, no pressure, quiet dinners, long conversations, walks in the park with Michael, getting to know each other truly, without the roles of employer and employee, without the urgency of desperation, just two people discovering and freely choosing each other. Marina's family, initially apprehensive about the social class difference, was won over by Gabriel's genuineness and their daughter's evident happiness. Sunday dinners at the humble house where Marina grew up became a tradition. Gabriel learned to appreciate simple food, unpretentious conversation, the lightness of not having to impress anyone. Michael flourished in this new environment of love and stability. His speech improved constantly. He started making friends at school, participating in extracurricular activities, and showing his own interests and personality. He still had his music therapy sessions with Marina, but now they were more moments of connection and fun than urgent therapeutic necessity. 1 year to the day after Gabriel had made that desperate promise, he organized a special event. It was no longer a high society charity gala. It was an intimate celebration at the mansion, bringing together the people who truly mattered: Marina's family, a few close friends, the household staff who had witnessed the entire journey, and the first patients from the Isabel Harrison Foundation who had shown significant progress in The garden, decorated with simplicity and taste, Gabriel proposed to Marina. Not as the fulfillment of an absurd public promise, not as a reward for services rendered, but as a genuine request from a man in love to the woman who had transformed his life. "Marina Miller," he said, kneeling and holding a simple, elegant ring, "you gave back not only my son's voice, but my own heart. You taught me that true love can't be bought, negotiated, or won through public promises. It just happens, silent and deep, when two souls recognize each other. Will you do me the honor of building a life by my side?" Marina, with tears of happiness streaming down her face, looked around. She saw her family smiling, her friends emotional, and Michael with a huge grin, holding a small sign that read, "Say yes, Marina," in colorful, childish letters. And she knew this was exactly where she was meant to be. "Yes," she answered, her voice firm and full of certainty. "1,000 times yes." The garden erupted in applause and celebration, but at the center of it all, Gabriel, Marina, and Michael embraced, forming a family born not from desperate promises or social obligations, but from mutual healing, respect, and true love. 6 months later, in a small, intimate ceremony in a simple chapel, Gabriel and Marina were married. Michael was the ring-bearer, carrying the rings with pride and reciting a short poem he had written himself about family and love. His voice, though still shy in public, echoed clear and emotional through the chapel. The honeymoon was spent on a quiet beach in the Hamptons, far from the spotlight and the hustle. Just the three of them, building memories, laughing, talking, playing music around a bonfire on the beach. Michael learned to play the ukulele during those days, and the simple melodies he created were the perfect soundtrack for their new beginning. Back in New York, life settled into a happy and productive routine. Gabriel continued to run his businesses, but with reordered priorities. He started working fewer hours, being more present at home, and actively participating in Michael's upbringing. Marina expanded the foundation, trained new therapists, handled complex cases, and published academic articles that became references in the field. The house, which had once been a space of pain and silence, became a vibrant home. The walls echoed with laughter, music, and lively conversations. The piano that had belonged to Isabel was played again, now by Marina teaching Michael. The paintings Isabel had created remained on the walls, but now they shared space with photos of the new family, with Michael's drawings, with certificates from the foundation. Isabel was not forgotten. Her memory was honored, celebrated, and integrated into the new life they had built. Michael spoke of her with affection, shared memories, and regularly visited her grave with fresh flowers. Gabriel had learned that loving again didn't mean betraying the past, but honoring it by choosing to continue, living fully. One quiet evening, 2 years after their wedding, Gabriel and Marina were in their bedroom talking before sleep. Michael was already fast asleep in his room, surrounded by musical instruments and books. The house was at peace. "Have you ever thought about how it all started?" Marina asked, nestled in Gabriel's arms. "A desperate promise, a public mistake, so much chaos." "I think about it every day," Gabriel replied, kissing the top of her head. "And I'm grateful I made that mistake, because without it, I might never have truly seen you. I was so focused on looking for extraordinary answers that I was ignoring the miracle that was already inside my own home." "Everything happens for a reason," Marina reflected. "I needed to leave college to learn about sacrifice and priorities. You needed to go through that desperation to learn about humility and true love. And Michael needed the silence so that all of us could learn to truly listen." Gabriel smiled in the darkness of the room. "Music was always the answer," he said. "Isabel knew it. You always knew it. I was the one who needed a painful journey to understand that the most powerful things in life aren't the most expensive or spectacular. They're the simple, the genuine, the ones offered with love." And so in that New York home that had witnessed so much suffering and so much transformation, 3 people slept in peace. A boy who had regained not only his voice but his joy for life, a man who had learned that true strength lies in vulnerability and love, and a woman who had discovered that abandoned dreams sometimes return in ways more beautiful than we could ever imagine. The music would continue to play in that house for many years. New melodies would be created, new chapters would be written, new challenges would arise and be overcome. But the foundation was solid, built not on public promises or social expectations, but on something much more resilient, patient love that grows in silence, strengthens in adversity, and blossoms when it finally finds the space to be truly free. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Gabriel, Marina, and Michael has touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of healing, love, and new beginnings, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what part of the story resonated with you the most. Every day we bring you intense stories like this one, revealing the deepest side of the human soul, the transformations that love can create, and the strength we find in our most difficult moments. We'll see you in the next episode with a new story that will stir your emotions and make you reflect on life.